Hi, everybody. So in this short, I hope, video, I'm going to explain about sexual selection. And the first thing that I'm going to do is tell you a funny story about Charles Darwin. This is a true story. So, first of all, Charles Darwin had a friend named Asa Gray, and Asa Gray was a botanist. And Asa and Chuck were friends, and they wrote to each other all the time, not via text, but via pen and paper and mail. So you might not know this, maybe you do, I don't know. But peacocks are not from Europe. Peacocks are not from the United States. Peacocks are from Asia. And when Charles Darwin was alive, peacocks were first introduced to Europe. Okay, and so here's the thing about Chuck. Chuck was never super confident in himself. You know, he'd failed out of college a couple times, didn't know Latin, didn't know Greek. The scholars he admired the most knew Latin and Greek. He had this idea that he was pretty sure that was right, but he had his doubts about the whole natural selection thing. And he was always concerned that somebody just in front of him had discovered natural selection. And, you can see a little reason why he was paranoid because, Wallace had his book ready to go before Chuck did. And Wallace, I'm not saying Darwin was a snob. I don't know if Darwin was a snob or not. We're all products of our culture. And, England is very classist. And probably Charles would have thought that Wallace was, if you just look at a straight up hierarchy, Wallace was in a lower rank than Darwin. And here we got Wallace, who's just some guy from Liverpool who can figure out natural selection, came to the same conclusions that Chuck did, and put the book together and was all ready to publish it, and only backed off because somebody said, hey, Darwin's working on the same thing. So where am I going with this? I'm rambling a little bit. It's true, I am rambling a little bit, but my real point is that Chuck was not super confident. And when somebody showed him a peacock for the first time, he writes to his friend Asa Gray. I've got the quote on the next slide, but it goes something like this. The sight of a peacock, whenever I see it, makes me sick. It's pretty dramatic response to a peacock. I think if you think about peacocks most of the time, they're so lovely, they're so beautiful, whatever. You're not allowed to eat them. Oh no, that's swans. You can only eat a swan if you're royalty. I don't know what the rules for eating peacocks are, but you get my point. So what was Chuck's beef with peacocks? It has to do with sexual selection. We're going to get to that. Okay. Wait, let's go here. I want to skip past. Wait. Oh, wait, I'm going to skip past that real for a minute. So the sight of the feathers in a peacock's tail, whenever I gaze at it, makes me sick. So funny. He wrote that. So that's Chuck writing that to Asa in 1860. So why would a peacock make him sick? And why did I preface this with this long rambling story about Chuck being sort of insecure fellow? Okay. What if I gave you $100? And I said, I'll go back to those words. What if I gave you $100 and I said, I'm going to give you $100 and you can either catch this boy peacock or this girl peahen. Let's say we were in a classroom, right? And I had 24 of you students, and you were in a classroom that fit 24 students. And I gave $100 to the person who caught me the first bird. Which one are you guys going to go after? You going to go after this guy with his long tail, or are you going to go after the girl with the short tail? Clearly you're going to go after the boy peacock, right? Because all you have to do is grab him. And Darwin looked at that nonsense, that tail, and he's like, what? How could I possibly be right with natural selection? How could natural selection have produced a peacock? Because look at that stupid, stupid tail. And Chuck just struggled with that idea over and over. And peacocks are not the only ones who are like this. Okay, here's some guppies. What if I give you $100 to catch a guppy in 30 seconds? Which one are you going to go after? The one with the big tail? Can't swim so fast? The one with the small tail? You're going to go after the big one. Okay, and there are other examples across the animal kingdom. So for instance, if you look at this anole right here with his bright pink dewlap, you know, it's dangerous to have this dewlap. And in fact, it's so dangerous that anoles only have those dewlaps in the breeding season. When it's out of breeding season, they're just plain as toast. And look at this bird here. He's showing off. He's got that long tail. Just grab that bird by its tail. Go and fly off without a tail. But the girl bird's like, what? Look at that. Oh, I don't know if you can see because my picture's in the way. She's like, what? Okay. And the lion, why does the lion have this big secondary sexual characteristic of his mate? And Darwin was really annoyed and puzzled by these traits. And so he was like, why do these traits exist? And then there are these other suite of traits that he was noticing that also didn't quite fit in with his idea of natural selection. So now remember, natural selection is a slow explanation for speciation, right? It says that if you've got, remember the 3 ingredients, if you've got variation, if you've got heritability, and if you've got an outside pressure, some sort of selection pressure, then you can change a population. And if you change a population enough and then you add some sort of barrier so that the genes can't get from here over back there, then you might get a new species. You might get speciation, you might get an adaptation. And all of a sudden he starts, because, you know, this was, if Darwin were my student, I'd be like, man, you just got to trust your observational and critical thinking skills. Just relax a little bit. You got it. And he did. He was really good at his job. I don't know if he ever believed how good he was at his job. Because when he published, he still thought he might be wrong. So he's looking at these characteristics like the peacock's tail and the guppy's tail and those other bird feathers, and he's like, oh man, but if you have those tails, you're gonna die. If you have those colors, you're gonna die. Why would you have these tails and these colors if it's gonna kill you? And then there are these other suite of traits where clearly you don't need these antlers and you don't need this weaponry. You don't need these antlers. You don't need these tusks. You don't need these, I don't know what you call them on a stag beetle, things on your head, weapons, to survive, but they do help you reproduce. And so that's what we call sexual selection. So sexual selection is selection for traits that help organisms reproduce rather than survive. When Wallace and Darwin first sat down independently and tried to come up with their idea of natural selection, it was all about explaining hooves on horses and quills on porcupines and how you get new species from old species. But Chuck kept thinking about things, and he realized that there were these other 2 suites of traits that didn't have anything to do with surviving. You don't need that dewlap, that bright pink dewlap, to survive. You sure don't need those peacock feathers to survive, but you do need them if you want to be the hot guy on the block and reproduce. Okay, this joke cracks me up. So why do all of these traits exist because the girls like them. It's all for female choice. Okay, so if we have, oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. Because the chicks dig them is one answer. And why do these trikes exist? These are all weaponry. Because the winner gets the girl. So, for instance, if you look at these, let's take the walruses in the center here. If you look at these walruses, this is an amazing winner take all scenario. The walrus who wins, so breeding season comes, all the walruses, walry, it's not really it, but it's funny when it be. Don't write that on paper. Pochron says all the walry. No, don't do that. All the walruses come to a couple of islands. There's intense male-male competition, and only one guy wins. And that male will have sex with as many as 100 females. So just think of all the babies you get, right? If evolution is getting genetic representation into the next generation, the king of the walruses, the king of the walrus, man, he's getting a lot of bang for his buck, right? He's getting all those girls. And if you look at these elk over here on the left, I don't know if it's your left, it's certainly my left. If you look at these elk, in the breeding season, you know, they're doing their bugling and they're advertising their location and they're hitting each other in the head because that's always fun. It's a winner take all thing. And so that male, the guy who wins this, gets a harem for at least a season, sometimes longer than that. And the losers all have to hang out until their time next year. And so, like, I think these are elk or roe deer on the bottom. Well, look, you can actually see an elk penis in that one if you look carefully. Not every day you get to see an elk penis. He'll get to father all the offspring. And so this weaponry helps win male-male competition. The weaponry is pretty cool, paying attention to, this is a digression here, not part of what I'm asking you to do here. The weaponry is tells you something about it, even with dinosaurs. So why do dinosaurs have weaponry? Because some dinosaurs clearly had weaponry. You guys are probably smarter than this, but when I first started teaching, which was not that long ago, people were always surprised by this idea that, you know, it wasn't Tyrannosaurus versus Stegosaurus. That all those weaponries, like the Triceratops, man, all that weaponry was for Triceratops versus Triceratops, wasn't for T-Rex versus Triceratops. And we know that because this is what mammals do with it. You know, elephants have those great big weaponry. Rhinos have those great big weaponry. And sure, they'll use it against you if you try to attack one of them. But most of the time when they're using that weaponry, it's for male-male competition. Okay, so now I've described something to you. I've described sexual selection. Sexual selection is a subfield of natural selection. And there are, I gotta move my header here. You guys can't even see this, I hope. 2 types of sexual selection. Darwin came up with these names. And man, if I could go back and talk to Darwin, I would say, man, come up with better names, because he called them intrasexual and intersexual selection. And I find that annoying. He should have just come up with different names for them. But anyway, intersexual selection is what you get when you have a trait that evolves just from mate choice. If a trait evolves because the girls think it's sexy, then we call it intersexual selection. So this frigate bird here, I like the expression on her face, like, ooh, that is a sexy throat thing. That's intersexual selection. And if you're using your weaponry for male-male competition, and if you're using it so that you win the girls, you beat the boys up to win the girls, we call that intrasexual selection. Okay, so we got natural selection. Within the umbrella of natural selection, we have sexual selection. And within sexual selection, we've got 2 kinds of sexual selection. We've got intersexual selection, which is female choice, and intrasexual selection, which is male-male competition. Okay, that's all pretty cool, right? So isn't it great? Like, So if you're walking around the great wide world and you're like finding some new creature new to you and you're like, oh, look at that, it's got great weaponry, then you know it's male-male competition. Okay, hands down, if I get to vote on what I think the coolest weaponry on the planet is for an animal, okay, this is what I'm voting for. You guys can all vote on your own, but I am voting for the platypus. And guys are like, wait, what? Yeah. So platypuses are the only mammal that make their own venom, and only males make venom. So that sort of indicates that it's male-male competition. But on top of that, males only make venom in the mating season. They don't bother making it outside of the mating season. And like, what are they going to do? Grab you with their bills? No, no, no. They've got these spurs, like right here, like on their web feet, like duck feet. They got spurs, like a drake would have, and those spurs can deliver venom. And the venom, so they, if you watch platypuses, when platypuses use their venom in the mating season, uh, a male will mount on top of the other male and jab his spurs into the male he's trying to fight with. And if he wins, he'll paralyze the back legs of the loser so that the loser can't mate in the mating season. It's diabolical. I think it's the best weaponry out there, man. It's subtle and cool and just weird as shit. Okay, you can come up with your own favorite weaponry. Okay, if it's weaponry, intrasexual. And if it's sexy, then it's intersexual. Is there another slide or am I done? I can't remember. Oh, yes, there's one more slide here. Let's see. The reason, so this is kind of a sidetrack, but the reason that Darwin called his theory natural selection is because at the time in England there was already a phrase floating around called unnatural selection. And unnatural selection was the word that people were using to talk about domestication, or not even just straight up domestication, but selective breeding. So you know, people of Darwin's age are living, I mean, industrial revolution sure is going on, but everybody there was living, knew about goats and sheep and cows and horses and even dogs, because the Kennel Club is starting off right at this time. You know, they're identifiable dog breeds for the first time. People knew about breeding for the cows that give the most milk, the sheep that give the finest wool, the chickens that lay the most eggs, or the chickens that have the best meat, whatever of those. And people called that unnatural selection. So they would be selecting for the cows with the most meat. Anyway, that's why. So if it's human derived, people were calling it unnatural selection. And what Darwin said is that in real life, natural selection is helping there, which I think is funny because even way back when in the 1800s, people had this idea of natural versus unnatural being anthropogenic versus not anthropogenic, where the problem with that is that humans are a product of natural selection. So by saying our actions are unnatural, it doesn't quite make sense. So, but regardless, Darwin put natural selection out there as a counterpoint to this idea of unnatural selection, which was just selective breeding for chickens of a particular kind or goats of a particular kind. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this mini lecture, and you need to go back and fill out the study guide that goes with it. After I finished all these mini lectures on evolution, there'll be a 100 question quiz that will put all of this together. So you really want to make sure that you have the answers to the study guides. All right, later.